Hello, this is TSM 311, Humans and the Environment. These set of four videos that will be a part of your module this week are in lieu of our lecture that we're missing. We want to make sure that you're clued in a little bit and kind of introduced to this as a part of the module. First, we want to acknowledge a student that contributed to the presentation that you'll see in each of the four parts, a former TSM 311 student, Carrie Wozniak. And we're going to start by revisiting our discussion on sustainability. So if you recall, last week in the module we talked about one way of representing sustainability being the three pillars of environmental concerns, social concerns, and economic concerns. And this week we're primarily going to look at the environmental concerns, though inherently they're interlinked. Certainly there are social implications of environmental decisions and economic implications as well, both for the positive and the negative. But for this week we're primarily going to focus on the environmental circle, and we are going to look at particularly things that are associated with agriculture, with food, fiber, fuel production. Recall that we can look at things in a detrimental fashion, but we can also look at things that are environmentally benign or environmentally beneficial. Which kind of feeds into that systems thinking that we've been starting to introduce. So looking at the whole system and trying to consider all of the impacts and all of the pieces that are involved in a certain topic. As we think about environmental resources related to food and agricultural production, we can create some primary categories that encompass the majority of resources that are going to be impacted. We can do water, land, soil, fertilizer, and energy. And that's not comprehensive, but it gets us a really good start into having a conversation about the environmental impacts of agriculture. We start with water, and if we look at our current water usage, so we're somewhere right around in here, about 70% of the freshwater supplies are used for agriculture, more than any other use of water. So it's certainly of a concern for us. If we project it on out, agricultural water uses begin to become overtaken by other urban life uses. But at present, agriculture is the primary use of water, so it's certainly a concern that we should be aware of and be able to converse about. If we look at land use, I'm going to play this video for you and then we'll chat for just a minute about land use.
This animation shows the global pattern of human land use over the last 8,000 years, a time when human populations began expanding following the origins of agriculture. The earliest areas of human land use are in Mesopotamia and the Fertile Crescent areas of Southwest Asia, followed by increasing areas of land use in China, India, and Europe. Watch for areas of intensive land use developing in India, especially along the Ganges River plain, and in northern China along the lower Yellow and Yangtze rivers. As time goes on, you will see areas of land use developing in South America along the Andes and in Africa, especially in the Sahel region. By classical times, land use in Europe is very intense, with up to 60% of the land under human uses, but we start to see fluctuations around this time too, with some areas abandoned corresponding with wars, famine, and other historical events that affected human populations. Continuing through the Middle Ages and Renaissance, land use in Europe and China increased greatly following the development of cities and towns. Now pay careful attention to South America. Following the first contact with Europeans around 1500, nearly 90% of the indigenous people of the Americas were killed, mainly by disease, leading to massive regrowth of natural vegetation, especially forest in the Amazon, Andes, and Mesoamerica. As we race towards modern times, we see the settlement of the
So as we look at land, the primary take-home from the introduction of land use is that agriculture is a primary user of land. In 2007, agriculture accounted for 34% of land use. As we use the land, we certainly are impacting the land. So as we convert forest land and natural vegetation into cropland, we're taking away nutrients and we're taking away more than is naturally put back into the soil. And so we certainly have to be aware of that. If we are taking away from the soil in order to continue to grow crops on that soil, then we have to provide nutrients back to the soil. And so we do that with fertilizer. And so as we have intensified our crop production, we have not been able to meet the demands of fertilizer needs with just natural fertilizers alone. And so we have an increased demand for synthetic fertilizers. And so we also have to consider how fertilizers are applied. And so natural fertilizers are primarily coming from manure from livestock production. And as we're have moved our agricultural systems away from more integrated systems, our livestock, which are generating that manure, are removed from the land. So in some cases, it's difficult to actually get the fertilizer to all of our land that we need to apply it to. So that also facilitates this need for or demand for synthetic fertilizers. And if we think about agriculture as a whole, there are a lot of energy inputs that are going into farming. So we need energy in order to run machinery, we need energy to manufacture those fertilizers, we need energy to transport things. So we are certainly big energy users. And again, as we're starting to think about this as a system, we need to think about all the components and where the demands are and where the stressors are and where the opportunities are as well. So as we're talking about energy, we kind of want to see, this image shows you that we have, equipment that's harvesting, equipment that's transporting, and, there would have been previously equipment that would have been applying. And so this is an example where looking at crop dusting for spreading fertilizer, might also be spreading herbicides or pesticides, but essentially another form of transport to move things that are needed onto the land. And in terms of where does synthetic fertilizer come from, this is an image that depicts the Haber-Bosch artificial nitrogen fixation process. And this is, one of the key innovations in terms of increasing our production capacities and production capabilities in terms of crop production. So we're going to stop here. This is just kind of an introduction. We saw it in class last week, but I wanted to refresh your memory a little bit and give you an opportunity to revisit some of the introductory categories that we could talk about as we're thinking about human-environmental interactions. We'll pick back up with a couple more sections before we leave you with a few questions for this week.